Hey everybody, welcome back. The Bad Pennies are back. I am Sho, and this is my friend Alan. I asked Alan a very interesting question, and the question was: is world peace possible?
Yeah. So, and by the way, this particular podcast is not just going to be aimed at the men in our audience this time. I think this is a human discussion, rather than just about men. But we'll make some specific, references that hopefully the men can identify with.
I think that I would like to say for the men that are going to watch this episode, feel free to share it.
Yeah. If you find it valuable.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. World peace. Okay. So I think that it at your standard beauty contest, it is the like number one.
What's the Sandra Bullock movie?
Yeah, it's the number one answer that is like, what do you want to contribute to the world?
I want world peace.
I want world peace.
Yeah.
Okay, so is world peace? Is it a reality? Is it something that can actually be done?
Is it achievable?
Is it achievable? And I would say in the human condition right now as it stands, I would say the reality of it is probably not. But can we make things better? The reality of that is absolutely yes. Mm. And can we always be working and striving to work, move in that direction? The answer is always yes. And regardless of how good things get or how bad things get, moving in doing the things that cause that. Now, if you'll recall, and if you've watched any of our previous podcasts, you'll know that first place, we, for the most part, we don't tell anyone what to do.
No,
we have suggestions. Yeah. And our suggestions come from a place of hopefully some wisdom and experience, trying things out and seeing if they work, and a number of failures, which is, again, the lessons that come from the failures, right?
Right.
So, but in the end, when it comes to relationships between human beings, and especially the ones we talk about in marriage between two people, we hope that you use the tools to eliminate conflict.
Yes.
Because conflict, nobody wants to live in conflict.
I don't know about that. Well, I know there's people that instigate on purpose. And they want the smoke, is what they say.
Right. But you have to look at what's behind all of that, and is that something they really want? And even with some of the people that I've known and worked with over the years who were terrible at creating conflict. I would say really good at. Their conflict was terrible, but they were actually very good at it and instigated it constantly. Mm. And yet, sitting them down and talking to them, they would say invariably that they didn't want conflict, but yet they were often the source of conflict or refused. So let's just address that first, because there's some real. As you can see, I have note cards. There's some real important ideas here. One is that creating conflict can be eliminated in an instant. And with all of the men and women that I've worked with over the years, eliminating all of that is, in most cases, very, very simple. It comes down to some very simple principles. And one of the very simple principles is stop arguing. Right?
Okay. So you got two people that don't agree. They shouldn't argue.
What's the point of arguing? Because nobody's going to change their mind.
Okay.
Nobody's going to change their mind in the middle of an argument.
So, are we talking about between two people, or are we talking about world peace?
Exactly. Yes, we are. We're starting because remember, remember your young years and let peace begin with me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so we're starting.
We'll talk about that. I'll tell you about that.
Peace. Yeah. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But we're starting with where actual peace begins.
With one person.
With one person, and it's interesting to give both men and women the tools to have great relationships without conflict, and then they won't do it. Even though they'll agree with it and they'll say, "Oh, that's a great idea, and I really should do that," and then they don't. They just go out and they don't do it, and they just go back to doing the same old, crap that they've always been doing that creates conflict, and then complaining about. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that we could look at from a psychological standpoint as far as our makeup, who we are as people, as human beings, right? And what got us here. And but I'm going to skip all of that, all right? Because that'll take us like 2 or 3 hours, and and you're going to have to send money, and we're going to have to give you some kind of college credit for it and all that kind of stuff. So, but if I just, and in most cases, I will tell men to just stop arguing with your wife. Just stop. Oh, and then I get things like, well, I'm trying. Well, you're an adult. Why would you have to try? Why is it so difficult to just stop? Well, there's some reasons. Again, ego gets engaged, right? Ego gets engaged, and you want to be right. And you want to be right for a number of reasons, including control, right? Personal ego satisfaction, not wanting to be wrong. A lot of people do a lot of stuff to keep from being wrong. So the drive to be right is one direction, and the drive to not be wrong is another direction. The drive to look good versus the drive to not look bad. Again, they're not really, as adult human beings, they're not really valid reasons. And that's what happens. We do these things that don't work, and then we try to justify them. We come up with excuses. All right. Well, why did you hit your sister? Well, that's because, she was being whatever and I didn't like it. And so that justifies doing something really ridiculous and stupid because you didn't like something.
Correct.
All right. So we come up with this whole list. And you can do it yourself. Sit down, take a little note card. As you see, I use these kinds of things, and you've heard me say a zillion times here, write stuff down. Okay. Don't go, I know you 20-somethings all want to do stuff on this guy, and I like this guy a lot. I use it all the time. But there are times where just writing stuff down with your hand onto a piece of paper will actually work better. And that's why you do it. It's not because you use this for convenience, but it doesn't necessarily cause change in your life, right? This is just a tool, and it's a great tool. But taking something like this and writing down the stuff that gets in your way, the things that you do, and being able to take a look at it and having the process.
So using a pen and paper is a way to get to world peace?
We are working toward world peace. You believe it or not, this is exactly where we're going, and it's not where you thought we were going to go, is it? All right, so there you go. So this is how we start having world peace, right? A piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and we start writing stuff down, because remember that world peace begins with each individual. We cannot solve world peace as a global transition. The global transition results as a transition of a mass amount of individuals happening simultaneously,
okay,
or nearly simultaneously. So a move in that direction has to start with yourself. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about that get in the way of world peace, and they also are absolutely 100% related to our interpersonal relationships as individuals, in our families, with our friends, in our marriages, in our communities, all right, in our society, and all of those things that get in the way in a personal relationship, like arguing when you know that it's ridiculous.
Okay.
Right? Because you want to be right. Or you want to get something. You're trying to get something that you think you deserve, and you think you deserve it so much that you don't care who gets hurt in the process.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Even if you haven't justified it that way, that's the truth. If you looked at it from an outside standpoint, and you watched your own behavior, and you saw that you trampled over a whole bunch of people to get from A to B, because you thought that you wanted to get to B so badly that it didn't matter how you got there. So you just did whatever you had to do. You lied, you deceived, you cheated, and here's the thing. As you're doing this to others, you're actually also doing it to yourself, because you don't want to admit to yourself that you're lying, cheating, deceiving, so-and-so, right? You're justifying yourself all along about how good you are. You're telling yourself what a good person you are, but if you just backed off and took a look at it from a little bit of separation, a little bit of distance, you would see that all you're doing is achieving something that you think you deserve at the cost of yourself and everyone around you. And if you multiply that from an individual, if you're doing that with just the people, even the people, you do it to the people you care about. You do it to your children. You do it to your wife, your husband. You do it to the people that are closest to you, the people that you work with, and justify it and multiply that from that small circle to a community, to a society, to a whole country. And then you wonder why we don't have world peace. So there are some things. Now, remember that there are a couple of ideas that I want to throw out that get in the way.
Okay.
I'm not sure where to start, but we'll just throw it out there. Okay, so we'll start with the first thing that came up around this whole concept, which is greed.
Greed.
So even though that I've just recently put it into the dictionary for men, I wrote it down on a card just to remind myself here, but the definition of greed as a noun is an intense and selfish desire for more of something, especially wealth and power.
Yeah. So when I visualize greed, I think that like if there were 100 people and everybody was able to get 2 plates of food every day, somehow somebody would want to take someone else.
Right.
So that there's going to be one person has one too many and there's going to be one person that has one too less.
That's right.
That's greed.
That's greed. And it drives all of us to some degree. And again, you have to take a look, if you take a step back and take a look at what's even driving the greed, this intense and selfish desire is thinking that you deserve something more than anyone else. And it overrides humanity. It overrides...
Does everyone have greed inside of them?
I think so. I think that we all, being human beings, have the capacity for greed.
It's part of that curse of Adam and Eve thing?
Well, yeah, if that's where you want to go with it, but it's just part of the deal.
Part of the deal.
Yeah, and you know, it's like being married and being upset about the things that you have to do as a husband or a wife, right? But it's part of the deal.
Okay.
So why are you upset? Right?
Okay.
We get into these things, and you know, we get into deals, and then we get upset about what the deal is requiring of us, and again, it's like arguing when you know it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. Not arguing is part of the deal, right? Arguing is not part of the deal.
Okay.
Not arguing is part of the deal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the deal is having a good life, a good marriage, a good relationship that's productive and powerful and creates a bond.
Yeah.
And when you argue, you destroy the bond.
And then when you're greedy, that destroys the bond as well.
Well, yes, of course, because again, an intense, selfish desire for more. Okay, that means that you deserve it more than anyone else. You deserve it more than your wife or your kids or your coworkers or whatever.
Right.
When a country starts to think in terms of greed, it deserves the land, it deserves the power, the control, it deserves the wealth,
Yeah.
it deserves the resources, regardless of whether whether it's legal or appropriate or even moral. If you want to even go there, if you want to go to play the moral card, we can always play the moral card, right? So, but if you want to start to take a look at where all this begins, it begins with me. It begins with ourselves. So that's one concept to take a look at is: are you letting your desire, intense, selfish desire for things, control your life?
Okay.
Okay. And then again, one of the things you might want to write down is, what are the excuses and justifications you tell yourself for all of that behavior?
Okay.
Okay. Because by doing it, you start to create that separation, and if you can't create the separation, you're not going to be able to do anything about it.
So everybody has greed inside of them. You can't get rid of it.
Yeah,
you can try to suppress it a little bit, but this is one of the reasons why we can't advance as a society toward this world peace.
It's one of the major factors.
Okay.
It's one of the major factors.
Okay.
Now, the next one that I put down, which is coming out in individuals as well as culturally or groups, is the concept of ideologies. Ideologies. And the definition of ideology is a firm set of beliefs or principles, especially one in which a political system, religion, party, or organization is based. And the problem with ideologies is that they're limiting. Is that they're limiting. And even, look, even if your ideology was about peace and generosity and kindness,
yeah,
it's still limiting. It's still limiting.
Limiting how? Limiting
well,
how?
You would think, okay, well, because it's not taking in consideration everything.
Okay. All right.
See, because ideology does not take in consideration everything. It only takes into consideration the actual belief or principle that is the ideology itself.
Right.
And that way, what happens? Well, and the reason I say it's limiting It's there's an idea in leadership in which we create a wall. It's like a filter, and everything that comes through it gets filtered.
Yeah.
And so you're not actually able to be a good leader because of that filter of ideology. And so everything that gets through gets changed. So you're not actually seeing what really is.
What's the opposite of ideology? That's what I was looking up my phone, but it went
Well,
somewhere
the
else.
opposite of ideology is reality.
Reality versus ideology.
Because reality is just what is without any spin.
And ideology,
Ideology is all about the story, the belief, the principle about it.
Okay.
All right. So again, you're limiting. And look, ideologies have been used for centuries or thousands of years in order to control people. Because you set down an ideology and you say this is the way it is, even if it isn't, right?
Yeah.
And more often than not, it isn't more than it is, right? The ideology is more about things that are not, but telling people that's what it is, and so people believe it. And
So
they
ideology becomes reality.
it becomes their reality, but it's again a limited reality.
It's a limited reality.
Yes, and it's through that limiting quality of an ideology, everything gets filtered. So you stop even seeing what's actually happening. I could tell you your ideology says that this card is white. But if I held up a card that's blue, you would say it's white because the ideology says it's white.
So it could be completely wrong.
It could be completely wrong because the ideology, people get locked into it and they start filtering everything. They start changing reality.
Okay.
And unfortunately, again, ideologies stand in the way of world peace because they're limited. They're a firm set of beliefs that limit. So in other words, a belief that my culture or my race is the right one, or my religion is the right one, and your religion, culture, or race is not the right one. Therefore, I can do whatever I want to you because I'm the only right one.
Yeah. Okay. I see that. I see what you're saying there.
It starts to, on a global scale, on a larger scale. I mean, again, it starts with personal ideology, and then it grows and it grows. So when we're talking about world peace, as long as ideologies are running everything.
Then
But here's the thing: we like. Oh,
Be right back.
I lied. I thought the battery.
Okay, here we go. Hey, we're back.
We're back.
Technical
A little-
difficulties done.
a
So we're
light
still talking
batteries
about
are off.
ideologies.
Yeah. So ideology. So, but here's the real one of the reasons that ideology stands in the way of world peace, like greed, is that most ideologies, or an awful lot of them, will prevent people from actually hearing that there's a problem with the ideology. In other words, that I mean, I can sit here and point out a million reasons why having a firm ideology, a set of beliefs or principles, will get you into trouble, and you won't hear it. You won't hear it because the ideology, again, is
I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly, and it creates a veil
Yeah.
in which everything gets filtered through.
So even if
It's like a mind. You ever heard of like a mindset? That's what ideology. A mindset is an ideology.
Yeah.
It's a particular set of beliefs or principles, and they're held on so strongly that even to rattle or shake any of those strong beliefs rattles us to the core of who we are, because we begin as a human being to identify with the ideology, and so if the ideology is wrong, then we're wrong. All right, so that's about as much psychology as I'm going to give you today, but that's what happens. So, but just think of it on a larger scale. So it's not just like a small group, but even a small group can cause a lot of damage, right? Look at a terrorist cell.
Yeah.
5, 10.
Right.
Right? Look at all the damage and all that they can cause.
Yeah.
Because of an ideology to believe that they can kill lots and lots of innocent people
Because
and
they're
destroy
wrong.
lots of property because they're right.
I'm right, you're wrong.
And their ideology is so right in
Yeah.
itself that they can do anything.
So what do you do
anyone
to
else.
what do you do to reprogram an ideology or unprogram an ideology? How do you
It's
get
very difficult.
if you have someone who completely thinks that they are right in what it is that they're pursuing?
Mhm.
How does that person then get to realize that they're wrong?
Well, from a psychology standpoint, it is a very difficult bridge to cross, and if even possible,
You have to really be
it's almost a
like
full
some
reprogramming.
reprogramming.
Yeah,
You have
it's a
to
full
actually
reprogramming. So if
like
so
Clockwork
again,
Orange or something.
the answer to this is the answer to world peace, and no one's come up with it yet. other than, and we're going to get to it in a second.
So we can identify the problem, but we don't have a solution.
We do not have the solution, or at least we have some solutions, but they're not. Just like ideologies can play long games, and the solution to the ideology could be a long game in which they get everyone to believe the way they believe, and the people that don't, they eliminate. And that's a long game, and it's been played a number of times.
So even wanting world peace is an ideology.
It is an ideology. So, and again, like I said, some positive ideologies maybe, they're positive to a degree, but they're still limiting because they, an ideology does not take in consideration anything other than the ideology itself. Okay.
So you have to have an open-minded ideology.
Well, being open-minded is actually one of the solutions here, but we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. All right. So hopefully you're all with me so far. You're going like, oh my God, there's no hope for the world. So, but there is. There's always hope, and that's one of the good things. So, out of all of this, there are certain things that happen. Again, I just mentioned control, gaining power. Dominance. Dominance is all about control. Gaining power is all about control.
Yeah.
And it's the ability to control others, to move them into the ideology that you actually have embraced. Because what else would there be? I mean, to control them so that you get power, wealth, sex. I mean, good food. Big mansions to live in, whatever, palaces, lifestyle, all of those kinds of things that we think we deserve more than anyone else. Back to the greed thing again. Right. An intense, selfish desire. So you see how ideology and greed working together can be very devastating to the world.
Someone once told me greed and fear of lack are not the same thing.
They are not.
But the actions are the same.
They will produce similar actions.
So
not necessarily exactly the same actions, but very similar actions, yes. Sometimes hard to distinguish.
If the dominant ideology is not if the dominant ideology has to combat a submitted ideology, but then it turns out that the submitted ideology is actually more open, included, and makes more sense, they are going to continue to fight.
Well, yeah, because again,
because they think they're right.
Exactly. And remember, it's a filter. It creates a filter. It creates a barrier, and even things that come through don't come through as reality.
Yeah.
They come through filtered by the ideology, okay, or the mindset. And
because what I'm thinking is like in the United States, you have these. United States has its political ideology.
Yeah.
And when it goes to take over, the United States stretches long and wide within the world.
Oh, we do, and we have figured out many ways to justify that. We're in the right,
but it's caused a lot of conflict, right?
Of course, in countries like this, people were, we're
because they think we're wrong, even though we think we're right, but they think we're wrong.
Well, because there's so many great things here, but that does not justify doing bad things, and that's what ideologies do.
That's the greed and the dominance part of it.
Yes.
Okay,
and so to think that you're more right than someone else, or that you're like when the first explorers came here, they looked at the Native Americans as
less than.
Well, not only less than, they viewed them as not only inferior but as primitives. They called them primitives. Savages.
Right.
And the thing is that the people here looked at the Europeans coming over, and they had words for them that were horrible. That they were smelly and unclean and all kinds of stuff, and untrustworthy.
The natives had those words for the.
They created words. Even one of them, the very first people that landed on this country, they had a word that basically meant like these weird smelling human beings, because they smelled, because they didn't wash, they didn't bathe.
Yeah.
Native Americans bathed all the time.
Okay.
They kept themselves clean, and the Europeans did not, and they brought diseases with them, and in their uncleanliness and whatever. I mean, I know everybody's going to go, "Oh, how dare you say this about?" But it's the truth. And so again, the ideologies prevent us from seeing the fact that the full breadth of it. Because when you can break out of an ideology and just base everything in reality, it's not that you
Can you do that?
I think so. I think to a degree you can. Yeah, absolutely. And you have to set up a system of people in your life that knock you when when you're being a
So it's more than an individual thing. It has to be a community then.
I think so. But it starts with the individual being willing, because unless you're willing, nobody can do anything with you, right? So we're gonna talk about this next bad word coming up here.
I think we got to break this episode down. We're at the 30-minute mark.
Okay, well let's break it. So come back. World Peace Part 2 coming up.